All right, we are here for the Historic Preservation Commission meeting of June 27th, 2011. We have a big gap at the dais. Both our chairperson and the vice chair are absent today. So before we can officially begin, we need to hear a motion from one of our commissioners recommending a interim chair for today's meeting.
I move to recommend Commissioner Morgan.
Second?
I second.
Commissioner Morgan's our chair.
Thank you very much.
Move your name tag, name plate.
Welcome to the meeting of the Historic Preservation Commission, June 27th, 2010.
2011.
Excuse me, 2011, sorry. I jumped behind.
You live in the past.
I do live in the past, that's true. The report regarding the posting of the agenda. The agenda for this meeting was posted on or before Tuesday, June 21st, 2011, on the bulletin board outside City Hall. We'll have approval of the minutes.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. You probably should do roll call, even though.
Oh, excuse me. Roll call.
Commissioner Tefankian,
Yes.
Commissioner Vartanian,
Here.
and Chair Mike Morgan.
Here. Now we'll do the approval of the minutes.
I move to approve the minutes of May 23rd, 2011.
I second.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Tefankian,
Yes.
Commissioner Vartanian,
Yes.
and Chair Morgan.
Yes. Continuing, we'll go to oral communications. Discussions is limited to items not part of this agenda. Each speaker is limited to 5 minutes. The commission may question the speaker, but there is no debate or decisions. Seeing as we have no oral communications for something that is not on this agenda, we will continue with comments from the commissioners. Item 5.
I only have one question, and I don't know if this is the appropriate time, but I haven't been able to watch all of the city's budget sessions, and I was just wondering if historic preservation in Glendale might be impacted by the budget for next year.
I haven't watched all of the sessions myself. Historic preservation's been identified by the city as, I can't remember, and Alan, you might help, the top, one of the city's higher priorities. And so there are no staff cuts being proposed, which is good for me. And the commission itself, there's no budget for the commission, as I'm sure you're well aware. So we don't anticipate any at this time.
If you recall, every department and operation was required to identify, I believe the terminology was essential functions, priority functions, and secondary functions. And when the Community Development Department and Planning Division put together our budget proposal, historic preservation was considered an essential function. So as far as we're aware, there's no impacts to your day-to-day operations as a commission as a result of the updated budget.
And I'm just curious, are there possibly any changes to fees for applications or anything of that nature, if you happen to be aware of any?
Yeah, there has been a proposal. I haven't seen the numbers yet, but fees will be increased across the board for all permitted activities that the department does. This will affect historic districts primarily as far as HPC related fees would go, and also design review fees will be affected. We've pretty much stood firm that we don't think there should be a fee associated with Glendale Register nominations, but there is a fee for the Mills Act, and that will also go up. And some of these jumps will be considerable. So we don't think they'll be prohibitive. but I haven't seen the numbers.
Anything, Commissioner? No. Then we'll continue with old business. Number 6. A, consideration of commissioner-generated proposals for future discussions regarding HPC policies and goals.
Yeah, so today we don't have any agendized topics, partly because we don't have a full house, but this is the time that commissioners could raise issues or thoughts that they would like to see put on this list. And if we get a second on it, then we'll move it forward as we have in previous months.
Okay. I don't see May as being, May being a historic designation month. Any agendized discussion about that? Can we put that on the agenda?
Yeah, we definitely can.
Possibly
I think we spoke about it informally
Yes.
as something that the commission, I think, wants to do more events and sponsor events during Preservation Month in May 2012 and ongoing. So this would be a great time to put that down here, and then in the coming months we can kind of brainstorm and come up with some ideas.
Okay.
Do I hear a second?
I second that.
Roll call.
Commissioner Tufrankian,
Yes.
Commissioner Vartanian,
Yes.
and Chair Morgan.
Yes. I would like to agendize the consideration of interior features.
We already have that as a second, so
Can we put it on
yeah,
calendar?
yeah, we can move it onto the calendar for the July hearing. So.
Since it's already seconded, you don't need to.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, we can just move it forward. Okay, anything else on this? We moved the solar panel discussion that you had in May to a resolved topic, primarily because the state has pretty much resolved that issue for us, and we'll be able to have some latitude with Mills Act properties, according to the city attorney. So if a Mills Act property were to come to us and we felt the installation would be a violation of the contract, that kind of stands outside of the state law because it's a contractual relationship between the city and the homeowner or the property owner. So that's really the only place we'll be able to have some teeth in terms of review of that issue.
Any other topics?
None from me.
No? Then we'll close that and go to 7, new business. A, 1374 Greenmont Drive, Glendale Register nomination and Mills Act application. I have 2 speaker cards in front of me.
Of the staff presentation first.
okay.
So. And Christina Park, our preservation apprentice, will be handling this case.
Good afternoon, members of the commission. Today we're reviewing the Glendale Register nomination and Mills Act application for the property at 1374 Greenmont Drive, located in the Oakmont neighborhood of Glendale. The original owners, Wendell and Coral Wall, commissioned the house in 1959, working closely with the architect Ray Mosier on its design. Mosier was pretty young at the time, leading us to believe this was one of his earliest projects. We don't know too much about him beyond that. The Walls were active in Glendale's social and cultural circles. They were involved with the Lions Club, Chamber of Commerce, Assistance League, Verdugo Club, so on. Some of you will remember 1374 Greenmont as one of the 4 homes featured in the Glendale Historic Society's 2010 home tour, called Adobe to Atomic, Glendale's Ranch Heritage. What makes it stand out among other ranch-style houses in Glendale and the Oakmont neighborhood is the strong modern influence and the incorporation of East Asian design features. It has that long, low profile and the visual spatial connection to the outdoors that's characteristic of many of California's modern-style homes. The house features board and batten siding at the front facade, wider than usual, with original metal casement windows throughout. The shallow-hipped roof, back to the picture, has slightly flared overhanging eaves, an accent wall of flagstone with built-in stone shelves for flower pots wraps around the left corner of the front facade, adjacent to the entry doors. At the other end of the facade, a decorative concrete block screen wall with wood posts adds a kind of geometric textural dimension. And a concrete step walkway is bordered on one side by a flagstone planter and on the other side by a custom iron handrail. So there are a number of landscape accents that suggest great attention to detail on the part of the designer. The north facade is flanked by a slope of ivy that gives the house kind of an illusion of floating above the street. Circular concrete stepping stones are found around the perimeter of the property, and some are actually embedded in concrete to form a sidewalk at the side facade. And lastly, there's an original mailbox shaped like a small house with flared eaves, and it kind of imitates or mimics the home's design. The interior rooms wrap around the central open space, which consists of a large pool deck and a patio. Large windows and a sliding glass door open onto the outdoor areas, which emphasize the home's indoor-outdoor feel. This feel is also accentuated by a covered lanai that stands between the house and the garage. Sliding shoji-style screens can be used to close off the lanai and cover the sliding glass door of the family room. And the property is characterized by lush landscaping throughout, from palm trees to shade bushes that sort of complement the Asian design theme. The Japanese-style garden in the patio was restored by the current owner based on the architect's original sketches. You can see the Japanese stone that was original. Very few alterations have been made to the property over the years. The exterior, interior, and landscaping all appear to retain a high level of design integrity. The pool deck and the roof were replaced by the current owners several years ago, back in 2005 and 2007, as was the garage door. The new door is aluminum and it's of contemporary design, but it doesn't detract from the character of the house. And upon reviewing the applicant's nomination and after conducting a site visit, staff concludes that 1374 Greenmont Drive appears to meet criterion D of the eligibility criteria for listing on the Glendale Register. The first half of criterion D mandates that a property exemplify one of the best remaining architectural types in a neighborhood. The surrounding Oakmont neighborhood has a number of modern ranch-style homes, but 1374 Greenmont is unusual in its incorporation of Asian design. But because, and we return to this time and time again, but in the absence of a comprehensive neighborhood-wide or citywide survey, it's impossible to determine that a property is one of the best remaining within a neighborhood. However, staff believes the house does meet the second part of criterion D, in that the architectural design contains outstanding attention to detail, design, and craftsmanship of mid-20th century modern influenced ranch style. And the merger of Asian design motifs with modern ranch indicates considerable skill on the part of the designer and results in a house that is unique within its immediate area. So based on these findings, staff recommends that the Historic Preservation Commission recommend to the City Council that 1374 Greenmont Drive be placed on the Glendale Register of Historic Resources. And staff also suggests that the HPC recommend the authorization of a Mills Act contract between the property owners and the city.
Can I now open it to?
You can see if there are any questions for staff first.
I have no questions.
And now open
No.
the public hearing.
Now we'll open the public hearing. I have two request to speak cards. The first is Odette Peters.
Actually, let the owners, could we let the owners
Oh,
go first?
okay. Then we'll change it to Mr. Devonian.
Good afternoon, commissioners and staff.
State your name, please.
I'm Haraj Dabudian. My wife Arlette and I are the owners of the house under consideration right now. I wanted to thank the Commission for the opportunity to be here and advocate our case. The original owners, Mr. and Mrs. Wendell and Coral Wall, obviously cared for this house very much. They helped design it. They lived in it till they passed away, and we got it from their grandson. We were lucky to receive this house in just about perfect condition. A good condition, not only structurally as the house was, but in relation and in the context of the architectural drawing and sketches that we were lucky to get with the house. Nothing was altered throughout the existence of the house from its original design. A few quick words about the first strong impression that the house made on us, and which hasn't faded away yet. I always tell my wife that setting foot in this house for the first time was like opening a letter from a time capsule. You could readily see if you altered a word or a phrase, you would destroy the message. And we realized that early on. We took it upon ourselves to be the custodians of a heritage that we were receiving. It wasn't just that we were buying a house. We were taking over a chunk of history of the neighborhood and the town that we lived in. Any changes that we did around the house, inside or outside, was basically to benefit the integrity of the home. We did research before we attempted any change. On the part of both my wife and I, we familiarized ourselves with the taste of the era that the house was built in, and we tried to do everything accordingly. The specific architectural design of the house, or what I would say the language spoken through this house, was and is worth preserving. We didn't shy away from appropriating proper funds throughout these years and going even over budget here and there. We thought it would benefit the house. And we consciously refrained from altering anything in the looks or the layout of the house because we believed that wouldn't have been the intention of the original design and the owners of the house. We received the house in the condition it was in. We preserved it to the best of our abilities, and we actually were very glad to see that we have the opportunity to make this official and put the preservation of this house on solid grounds. Thank you very much for the opportunity again, and I will be glad to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much. Do you have any questions?
I have no questions.
No questions? Then we'll proceed to the next person. And that is Odette Peters.
I am Odette Peters, interim chair, members, and members of the commission. I am Odette Peters, as I said. My husband and I live at 1400 Greenmont Drive, just across the street from 1374 Greenmont. My husband and I support the owners of the 1374 Greenmont Drive in securing the Mills Act for their wonderful property. This significant resident is a perfect condition for this ordinance. The current owners have done a fantastic job in greatly preserving the integrity and property value of this home and thus the neighborhood in Glendale. Please strongly consider approving this property for the Mills Act. It is a deserving home. Thank you. By the way, I don't know the owners. I did not even realize it was sold. So this is the first time for me to meet the owners. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Since we have no questions, we'll close the public portion and continue with Commissioner Vartanian. Would you like to start?
Sure. I will start. First of all, I want to thank Mr. and Mrs. Davudian for bringing this home forward. It truly is an exemplary example of the ranch-style home. And in speaking with you, I understand your commitment to the home and your custodianship of it. I would agree with staff's analysis that the home does, in fact, meet the requirements of criterion D. I think the design, what I really like about the house is the ranch style, which was so ubiquitous in the region in the 50s, and how it's been merged with the Asian influences. I really appreciate, for example, the juxtaposition of the very local Palos Verdes flagstone with the very Asian front doors with the Asian motifs, the combination of the indoor-outdoor spaces, and how the indoor really flows out to the outdoor. Could we go back to the little courtyard? One of my personal favorite features is the courtyard between the living room and the master bedroom.
Yeah.
I think many people might want to enclose that and make it into another room, but the beauty of it is that it is somewhat of a room. It feels like an interior room, even though it's an exterior patio. And from this picture, the sliding glass doors would be right in, front of the garden from the living room. And I think that's a very nice feature. Also on the other side, if we could possibly go back to the pool, the shoji screens, which are reminiscent of Japanese details. Do we happen to have one looking back at the shoji screens on the living room?
I don't think we have that one.
But again, the same shoji screen element on the living room, where if you wanted to, you could close off the sliding glass doors and sort of live inside. And when you want to, you can open them up and, expand to the outdoors. Same thing with the lanai. If I'm not mistaken, the lanai can be closed off and made into an interior space, or it can be opened up as it is right now. And so I think those are very unique elements that have been very well designed. And also, as the owners stated, as Mr. Davudian stated, that the home is virtually intact. The owners built it and lived there until 2001. There have been very minimal changes. So I think it's a true reflection of the original intent of the home. And I would support its listing on the register.
Okay. Mr. and Mrs. Davudian, thank you so much for bringing forth your home. It is truly a very beautiful, very tranquil home. It has a Zen characteristic to it. It is very well maintained ranch style with Asian influences, and it is a very special subtype of ranch homes, because you see a lot of ranch homes. However, you don't see that many with the Asian influence in it. One of the more noticeable features as you walk up to the home are the overhang eaves, on the front facade of the home, the decorative concrete block screen, which also picks up on the shoji geometric feel that you see in the backyard. So there's a lot of subtle Asian influences, and one of them is the custom handrail, which I really appreciated that. That was very beautiful. It's very beauty and simplicity. And I particularly like the mailbox with its flared roof line. As you get up to the front door, the Asian motif on the front door, again, enhances the Asian influence. I really like the flagstone wall as you're standing there, and it's good use of natural materials in making the shelves. I also noticed the many plants that you have around the home, in keeping again with the Asian or the far east. The bamboos you have and some of the plants have been shaped in the bonsai style. And standing in the backyard, as my fellow commissioner mentioned, the shoji screens are a beautiful part of the home, which can be slided to give a little more privacy or shade. However, when they are open, I really like that you can see into the house. So there is the exterior is invited in and the interior is invited out. And from the backyard, when you're looking in, you again see the natural materials used within the home. You see the wood paneling, which picks up on the exterior. So it's very, very nicely done. Again, very minimal changes, and that is very much appreciated. I think you've done a very good job in keeping the house as it is and bringing back the Japanese garden. I believe you had the plans the architect had made, so that was very nice. And I think that's probably a very pleasant, and I would use that word again, tranquil and zen area to just to sit in. Would I bring up conditions now?
Sure. Yeah, if you have any thoughts.
My thoughts are, I would love to see the house on the on the Glendale Registry, and I do approve of it. Only thing that I would like to see is possibly bring the fountain back to working order, and I think the screen on the back, just as we looked at it, possibly needs either to be painted over or, and that would be it. So thank you very much again for bringing forth.
Well, I also would like to thank the Dabudians for bringing it forward. I had the pleasure of coming to see the house when it was on the Glendale Historic Society's, their tour from Adobe to Atomic House. It is a wonderful house. Two of the things I always ask myself when I go to see a house, one is, especially for a historic house, is would the owners recognize it, and would they be joyful at recognizing it? And yes, they definitely would. It is. You have maintained it to such a degree. It is a joy just to walk into the house. And unfortunately, at this moment, we're not allowed to talk about the interior, but the way the interior flows is just, it's nice and warm. Your attention to detail. A lot of people could have taken this house and changed it all around. This house is, you maintained it excellently. And when you go outside and you're standing on the deck, there's a sense of Zen-like. I know it's been used, but it is very a peaceful place. And the fact that you went to the architect and had the garden replaced and to his specifications, I think is exemplary as far as what we would like to see as far as homes on the Glendale Register. I agree with my Commissioner Tufanikian that we would like to see the fountain, if it still could be working on, and if there's anything else that either of you would be interested in having added onto the list. But I'm very much for the house. It's the kind of house that we don't have a lot in our inventory, and I think it is one of the best examples in the city of Glendale.
Okay, so if I heard correctly, is the condition, everyone agrees that the fountain is to be restored, as well as the wood screen behind the planter. What the commission needs to do is determine a time frame for that to occur. We usually we enter into the contract at the end of the calendar year, so we always give people at least one calendar year to complete the work.
I think that would be fair. A year or two, do we usually?
We can check with the owners. I think this is a minimal request from the commission compared to some other ones, so I would think that a year is possible. Okay, so
just so I'm certain on the one condition, was it one specific screen that you were?
It's that wood right behind the fountain.
The wood verticals and horizontals.
Oh, okay. That's that's painted. That's currently painted.
Yeah, it's painted,
Yes.
but it could use a touch-up. So.
Okay, I think that's pretty nominal, so
Yes.
I would agree to that.
Okay, and vote. Call, yeah.
I think we need a
Do we
motion.
have roll call?
Oh, we
Oh,
need a
I'm sorry, motion,
A
yeah,
motion.
motion.
Motion, yes.
Okay.
That's- Yeah.
Okay. I move that the Historic Preservation Commission recommend that the City Council designate the property at 1374 Greenmont Drive as a historic resource, add the property to the Glendale Register of Historic Resources, and authorize the city manager to enter into Mills Act contract for the property. And it would be under the proposed resource contains outstanding or exemplary elements of attention to architectural design, detail, material, or craftsmanship of a particular historic period. And the conditions would be to bring the fountain back to order and paint the back wood screen
By December 31st, 2012.
by December 31st, 2012.
Roll call?
Commissioner Tefankian,
Yes.
Commissioner Vartanian,
Yes.
and Chairperson Morgan.
Yes.
Great. Congratulations.
Congratulations.
We now have our second new business, item 7B, 330 Kempton Road, review of proposed design for addition below level of pool deck, extension of pool deck, demolition of unpermitted addition to house, and construction of new addition in the same location. Demolition of unpermitted detached pool house, construction of freestanding wall and barbecue area at pool deck.
Okay, I'll begin introducing this item, and then I'll hand it over to Milka Toledo, who's the case planner for this, and then we have the owner and architect will also have a presentation for the commission. I just wanted to introduce this by saying this is something that the commission hasn't seen before, at least in recent years, if ever, and it's work that was done without permit at one of our designated buildings. That said, while it's unfortunate, and we've spoken very strongly with the owner about this is unacceptable and we can't allow this to happen again, we also have to remember that the commission isn't an enforcement body, so there's no sense that any of your decision-making would be punitive in any case, particularly because we believe at staff level that this project does meet the Secretary's standards and the goals of the preservation program. But just so you know, there are penalties assessed to owners not anywhere in the city, in a historic building, in a historic district, or any other property that are assessed through the Building and Safety Department. So that will definitely be happening here, so you know that this isn't a situation where, get-out-of-jail-free card is being issued. But just a reminder that you're really to be focusing on whether this work is appropriate to the historic site, and also that, in general, we don't want our historic buildings to be seen as frozen in time, so we want work to be respectful of historic character, but we also think it's really important that owners citywide understand that because a building is designated or even has the Mills Act, that it means that changes can't be made as long as they're appropriate. Milka Toledo will introduce the project and go through the staff report.
Yes, thank you, Commissioners. This property, as you stated, is located at 330 Kempton Road, historically known as Lorelei, and again, it is designated as a historic property on the Glendale Register and is also under the Mills Act contract. So again, the Commission is the final design authority for this project. Brief history on this project in terms of its historic nature and location as it relates to where in the city it's located in the northwest Glendale area. The property is accessible from Kempton Road, but has two frontages, both on Kempton and from the rear. It abuts Brockmont Drive. However, as I'll explain as I continue along, there is partial visibility, if any, from Kempton Road, but slightly more visibility from certain angles on Brockmont, but again, limited. This is a Spanish colonial revival style home that was built in 1929 by Peter Dam, who was credited with being the inventor of the armored car. The Spanish colonial revival house has been on the Register of Historic Resources since 1977, designated as GR 027. Again, the design of the house consists of a central tower or turret, if you will, as you can appreciate in the drawings behind you or on the panel. with wing extensions on either side arrayed to allow occupants to take full advantage of the views that are visible from the property. The site topography consists of downhill slope terrain from the front, again that would be from Kenton Road, slopes down towards the rear abutting Brockmont Drive. However, the house itself is situated on a relatively gently sloping terrain, if you will, but again it's steeper along the sides than the rear. As a result of its terrain, the rear of the property consists of narrow terraced gardens linked by walkways and steps surrounded by lush vegetation and mature trees. In terms of the pool deck area, there is a pool cabana that is located towards the northwest side of the property at the same level as the house. The residence is set back significantly from the street and is again only partially visible from Kempton Road when again viewed through the entry gate and down the narrow driveway which leads to the motor court. Portions of the rear of the house, including the partially constructed new recreation room, can be seen from several locations downhill from the property with limited visibility, and that would be again based on staff site inspection and when we did a drive through the neighborhood, it would be through the intersections of Columbus and Cumberland, Brockman and Cumberland as well. And a very small opening in the site plantings on the property itself where it abuts Brockmont. In general, however, the property and the work area cannot be seen from the adjacent streets. I won't go into the project description. There is a bullet point in your staff report, and you actually prefaced it, Commissioner, when you introduced the case, unless you have questions regarding any of the items. But if not, I'll just go straight to the site planning and the mass and scale. Again, the changes are in terms of, while there are changes to be addressed today in terms of the site planning, staff believes that the changes are relatively minor. So therefore, the overall site planning will remain. The addition will be constructed underneath the pool deck, which involves the removal of a portion of the terraced garden. However, because the property itself consists of multiple terraced gardens, staff believes that it would compensate the existing for the loss of maybe a couple of terraced gardens. This location is set away from the house, and it's not visibly connected to the property from grade level, or to the house from grade level, but in terms of the front facade of the addition, again, it's not visible from the street at all, only not visible at all from the house, only the extended pool deck, which indicates the addition's presence. The new construction at the master bath will occupy the same footprint as the existing non-original structure, and therefore the site plan will remain as it was before the current project was undertaken. The construction of the new freestanding wall and the trellis with the bar area at the pool deck will not significantly alter the existing site plan, and also the demolition of the pool house removes a structure that was not part of the original site plan. So, in summary, the changes to the site plan appear to be appropriate because they do not affect the overall historic nature of the house and alter only a relatively small portion of the extensive terraced gardens. And therefore, staff believes that this aspect of the project meets the Secretary's standards and does not affect the property's ongoing eligibility for listing on the Glendale Register. In terms of its mass and scale, again, for the proposed recreation room, which again is located underneath the pool deck, staff believes that it is appropriate. It is subordinate to the main volume of the house and is barely perceptible from the house, being visible primarily from the south and the bottom of the garden. The south facade looks towards the rear of the lot and the city beyond. Its one-story design, the use of multiple arch windows and wrought iron treatment on the roof deck minimizes its mass and scale. And in addition, the climbing vines that are being proposed in order to articulate that area of the elevation, in addition to other planters at the base of the south wall, will also help reduce its apparent mass when seen from the few locations nearby streets. The addition proposed at the master bath respects the mass and scale of the historic construction, and staff believes that the proposed design is not quite differential enough to the existing volume, and that its front facade should be pulled back several inches to more clearly indicate its presence as an addition to the structure. So that's one recommendation that staff has for that particular area. The new accessory structures on the pool deck above integrate well with the addition while respecting the mass and scale of the house. The structures are complementary to the overall design of the existing, and both structures have a sense of openness in terms of, for example, the freestanding wall having the multiple arched openings and also open to the sky, as well as the trellis in the barbecue area. And again, they do not conflict, but rather respect the existing mass and scale of the house, which is important in this case, and again, respecting the views from the property. And finally, in summary, the mass and scale of the proposed changes appear to be appropriate to the historic nature of the house, with the exception, again, of the placement of the bathroom addition's front facade, which should be recessed several inches further than proposed. But overall, staff believes, again, that the mass and scale of the house does meet the Secretary's standards and does not affect the property's ongoing eligibility for the listing on the Glendale Register. Finally, the design and detailing of the project does appear to be appropriate to the historic character of the house, with the exception of two portions of the proposal, which actually are stated in the comments or recommendations that staff has included in the report. However, the link between the house and the recreation area will be again underground, allowing the latter to appear completely detached while technically being attached to the house. And finally, the new construction is quote-unquote reversible, meaning that it could be removed in the future without affecting the historic form and integrity of the property. For this reason, staff believes that the design and detailing of the project does meet the Secretary's standards and does not affect the property's ongoing eligibility for listing on the Glendale Register. Staff has met with the applicant project team on several occasions, and the applicant has improved the proposed design and chosen high-quality materials to ensure consistency with the architectural style and historic character of the property. However, because the submittal was actually done recently, staff has not or had a limited time to review it in terms of compliance with the zoning code, for example, but not limited to interior setback, floor area ratio, lot coverage, and landscaping. One item that staff did note brought it to the applicant's attention, which would be the floor area ratio, which is important in this case, in addition to all the other requirements. But that was actually one item that kind of stood out. So the applicant was made aware, the project designer was made aware of it, so that this is dealt with prior to the issuance of a building permit. So any significant changes to the project design that may arise as a result of zoning compliance or zoning issues will be brought back to the Commission for review. Based on the analysis that staff has noted, including the opinion that the proposed work meets the Secretary of the Interior's standards for rehabilitation, will not make the property ineligible for ongoing listing on the Glendale Register, staff does recommend approval for the proposed project with the following condition. One of them, again, being to address the zoning issues and to address those prior to the issuance of a building permit. And two design comments, 1 and 2, in terms of, for example, the arched openings located in the recreation area, recreation room, that to redesign those arched openings on the new recreation room to be more rectangular in proportion than square, and to increase the recess of the master bath addition from the west facade of the historic wing to create a more meaningful separation between the original and the new construction. So with that, if you have any questions, I'm available. And I didn't actually read the entire report.
I just have one quick question. When we talk about moving,
Is the light on? Yeah,
Yes.
great.
when staff recommends moving the wall back to differentiate several inches, do we have a more specific recommendation, or is it?
Yeah, we can check with the architect when he addresses that. There is a proposed, what appears to be maybe a 2 or 3 inch recess. When we made the recommendation, we thought it would be probably more towards 6 or 8 inches. So you actually see the corner of the historic volume of that bathroom wing, and then you see the new facade starting behind that. So, based on what we hear from the architect, the commission can ask for a specific number, or we could work that out at staff level.
Okay, thank you.
And I also wanted to make sure that we do address the materials that are going to be used.
I believe the architect will be discussing the materials. And then just to clarify, in case it helps in terms of the sequence of work, 2 of the areas that you'll be considering, the extension to the bathroom, as well as the demolition of the previous pool house, both of those were unpermitted structures, and they were put up by the previous owners. The old pool house looked like it was somewhat older, and we believe the most recent owner may have done that bathroom extension, which you hopefully saw is not really in keeping with the character of the house. Then the actual recreation room is the largest part of the new construction that was done without permits by the current owner. We'll introduce architect Seth Briskman is here to discuss the project. Yeah, open the public hearing.
Yeah, I'd like to open the public hearing.
Good afternoon. Mouse.
If you could hand him the mouse.
And your name, please?
My name is Seth Briskman. I'm a designer and serving as a project facilitator for the owner, Mr. Lopez.
Actually, give him the keyboard.
Thank you, Milka, for the report. It's relatively comprehensive, so I'm just really going to touch on points, more or less, of the design and some of the reasoning behind where we are at, and a little bit more explanation of the specialty of Lauralee. The history itself, which you touched upon, Peter Dam, who was an automobile fabricator, and his claim to fame of his life when he invented the armored car. After inventing the armored car on the East Coast, he moved out to the West Coast and settled in the area of Glendale. At the time when he came into Glendale, he was very, very appreciative of the architecture in the area, as well as solar design and passive solar technologies at the time. What he did was build several models. He built several models of the idea of the house that he wanted, and then camped out on the site for many evenings to see how the solar lines hit the house until he felt that he was comfortable with it, and then went about and built the house. He occupied the house in 1929, donning the name Lauralee, and then stayed there for 24 years or so until his death. And since then, there's been several owners that have done small modifications to the house. On the approach to the property, Milka had talked about it barely being perceptible from the street. If I point you to the upper left photo, that's the first approach when you're coming up from the intersection of Columbus and Cumberland. There's absolutely nothing noticeable other than just the 2 identifying plaques, identifying it as a historical resource, and also labeling it as a private residence circa 1929. The middle photo is more or less as you're cresting the hill. You can start to see in just a hint of the top of the turret and a little bit of the Spanish tile, giving you an indication that there is something down there, but it's not for public viewing, so to say. And then the third photo shows you as you actually are approaching onto the driveway and the private road that feeds down into Lauralee. The site itself is a flag lot. It's a downslope flag lot, again offering privacy from Kempton Road. It does have frontage on Brockmont Drive, but there's an elevation change anywhere from 10 feet to about 15 feet from Brockmont. So there's no physical access to it, but there is visual access is relatively landscaped, but there are some view sheds that can peer up into the property. Certainly on the east side, where the slope is almost exposed granite hill, you can look directly up towards the house. As you enter on the driveway and you peer down, you are, you know the second that you're on the cobblestone driveway that it is something different. It's relatively, it kind of takes you out of the normal sense of society and starts to drop you into what you really feel is a special place. The lot itself is an assemblage of 5 lots. Originally, the property was, I believe, 2.5 acres or so, and then was subsequently split up. I'm not sure if it was done at the same time of the house or maybe shortly after. The houses that are adjacent to this property are certainly more recently built. So the thought is that that property may have stayed intact for many years until they started to break it up. It's a U-shaped entry court that brings you down. When you arrive at the bottom right, you'll see the motor court. And there's still a few steps down before you get actually into the entry court of the house. This shows the original layout prior to any modifications that were done. You see on the upper left side, that's where the original pool cabana was, as well as the pool. There was a series of retaining walls there, as well as some planter walls. When the owner purchased the property, this area and the areas below were intensely over-vegetated, so he's slowly and methodically cleaned that up and has restored it back to very manicured lawns. On the upper left side, you'll also see there's a staircase that brings you down into the site, as well as a bay patio. That bay patio is what was used as our definition for how far the extension of the addition went when they proceeded to build without permits. So they tried to stay within what they considered a buildable area from what was perceived from before. Just on the lower part of that angle is a rectangular space, which was a shed that contained all the mechanical equipment for the house. In the upper right drawing behind you, you can see an elevation of that area that shows that shed and also that bay that came out. Underneath that extension and underneath the shed area is a crawl space that has been used as a maintenance yard, a landscape boneyard, as well as an equipment room for all of the equipment for the main house.
Seth, if you want to address the drawings directly, you can go back there too.
Okay.
So.
I have most of them actually in the presentation, I believe. Just to give you familiar with the property itself, once you drop down, the upper left is a very quaint landscape trellis entry gateway. The wrought iron details, the arched windows, the stained glass, all of these elements are original to the house, and if anything have been cleaned up since the current owner has taken possession. Truly sets a tone once you step down into that courtyard. These are just additional images around the house, just showing the architecture, the feel, the forms. It's a very organic structure set up around that courtyard on the promontory, trying to take advantage of all the views, 270-degree views from east all the way to the west. This is the pool area. These photos were taken recently, but not recently considering the construction that's gone on there. The pool house itself, portions of it still remain, but portions of it were failing at the time of possession of the property. There was consideration early on of adding on to this structure, and code and other elements stopped that plan. The bottom drawing, if you can see, shows the entry into the pool house with the windows on the right. There's a small square window on the left side, and it's hard to see, but let me point out. Slight delineation of cracking of stucco right here, which means that bathroom was added on after the pool house was added on. There are some permits that had mentioned somewhere in the 50s about there being a structure of a pool house there adjacent to the pool. but the history records are a little bit ambiguous as to exactly when things were built there. And on the right side, in the upper right photo, you can see the master bathroom, and then on the right side of that,
Got to stay near
I'm
them.
sorry, on the right side of that, you can see that there is some level of an addition that is not the same architectural integrity of the rest of the structure. So it's understood that portion was probably added at some point by a previous owner as well. The subsequent occurrences on the site, obviously we are aware that there was construction done without a permit in this area. The pool was drained and portions of the deck were demolished during this time. The pool house was intact and remained intact until, I believe, about 4 weeks ago, 3 to 4 weeks ago, when a piece of equipment was being removed out of the pool. It struck the side of the pool house just adjacent to where the windows are in the upper left photo. There was a main beam that held up the structure of the pool house itself. It was a beam that crossed, and the roof pitched down to it and then splayed towards the front. So the second that beam was knocked out, the integrity of the roof was gone. So the owner proceeded to have it cleaned up for safety purposes, and that's why the structure is where it is right now. The owner's intentions. I will have the owner speak afterwards, but generally, he is a longtime resident of the Glendale, Burbank area. He has straddled that border right between Glendale and Burbank, I think, for 18, 19 years now or so, in several houses. He's appreciative of the Spanish Revival style. He is from Mexican descent, and therefore breathes and lives these details, and is adamant about maintaining them inside and outside of the house. He has since moved into the property. He's restored interior finishes. He's taken things like the original Saltillo tiles inside were painted over several times. He's sandblasted those items and brought them back to original condition. He has taken out any items that were not period pieces, chandeliers and things like that, and has supplemented them with period pieces, as well as sconces and artworks and tiles and things like that to bring it up to the style that he really likes. On a side note, when we talked about what he wants to do with the property, the first thing he said to me is he plans on dying on this property, so it's something that he plans on staying there forever. And he hopes that future modifications can be approved that will help him stay in the facility under the current needs that he has. Which brings me to our next point. A lot of these older houses, historic houses, are generally smaller spaces. They were not designed for the lifestyle that we may have right now. And they certainly weren't for dancing rooms or entertainment or fitness gyms and things like that. So the owner intent was to create a larger space to set up for items like that, a flexible space, as well as bringing all the other amenities up to date as he can live in the house. And then the last thing, which is important to him and important to us and important to the city, is to bring everything up to code. Items that we identified that were not permitted, to bring them up to code, to reconstruct them if they were unpermitted, and to make sure that the house is intact and whole. The proposed site plan, we were very fortunate to have the commissioners come out and walk through the property. I believe they have a general understanding of the work that's going to occur and the work that's remaining to occur. But generally all of the work is done on the upper left corner. I show a dotted line of where the pool house existed to just give you an orientation of where the pool is in relation to that. Coming to the pool area, again, the exterior bottom limit of that deck was set by the existing patio that was there before, and just extended out and orthogonally closed off about where the mechanical room was, but it does increase the deck space that they had there previously. We're showing a freestanding arched structure just to really delineate areas on this patio. It will set up for some level of shade or respite from the rest of the area. And then we have the open trellis bar area to help for entertainment, for historic events, for just general leisure on the patio. We are showing right now, and it is identified in the program, a fire pit, but it looks like that is just going to be a temporary item, more of a freestanding, self-contained element as opposed to a hard-lined and piped fire pit. So more of a decorative landscape element than anything permanent, as are all the other elements, with the exception to the relocated pool in this area. I do show on this plan the reconstructed master bathroom area, correct, right there. That area is currently set up as a shower and an outdoor courtyard. The idea will be to roof that whole area in and close it by stepping back the wall that does face the pool. We have no set dimension on which to set that wall back. It's somewhat arbitrary, but respectfully, 2 to 3 inches isn't enough. It should be at least the width of a tile or a CMU block or some level of a member to bring it back about 6, 8, 9 inches or so, so we can tie the roof in a little bit better as well. So we have no problems with making that, addressing that concern for the committee. And then also inside that bathroom, what we show is the extension and the spiral staircase that will bring you down into the addition. Originally, we looked at perhaps adding an appendage to the corner of the structure. For recommendations from the commission, it's best that we take that inside and leave it inside the corner of that part and leave the house intact as it is. And in fact, as the commissioners were able to see, there's a doorway at that lower level that was always part of the main house. There was a stairwell or a pathway or a chase or something that came down at that lower level. So in terms of constructability and work, there's less work to be done because it's actually excavated, but it certainly needs to be reinforced up to modern code and whatnot. But we feel relatively happy that that we maintain the corner of that house, and it really appears as almost like a secret entrance into this lower area. This drawing shows 2 sections. The upper section is the actual existing conditions right now. This is just to really delineate that we're staying more or less within the confines of where we were before and just cleaning up and excavating underneath the pool deck, taking advantage of some space. As Milk had mentioned, we are sacrificing, I believe it's 1 to 1.5 of the terraces that were in that area. But as you may have been able to see, it actually ties into one of the existing walls as it comes across the back of the property. So we feel happy that it's relatively integrated with the landscaping and the sites that's already there. This drawing shows the elevation of the proposed area. The archways were more or less dictated by the structure that I found when I came there. There's a rhythm that was set up by the structural steel, so I tried to work backwards into the sizes of those elements. As I mentioned during the walkthrough, there's consideration to widen a little bit of the pilasters in between the columns, which would reduce the squatness, perhaps, that you're seeing in this. And it'll provide us a little bit more bearing to grow some vines and bougainvillea and things like that. The reason for the windows appearing somewhat squat at this point is as we were going through our building height and FAR review, we identified through survey, we had it surveyed at both points, the tip of the turret and the tip of the roof, as well as the bottom of the new structure, that we were 17 inches exceeding the building height limit. So as a response in discussions with the planning department, we're going to raise the elevation around the structure up 21 inches to satisfy the building height limit, which will mean that you will step into the new addition and then step down 3 risers into the space. And that inadvertently forced the windows that were larger to become squat at the lower level. So we can look at addressing the rhythm of those windows. The archways certainly up above and down below are more or less trying to mimic what's found in the rest of the property. There are more triptych windows, a larger single arch with two smaller arches on the side, found in two locations, but in the living room we've also found just a single arch like this. The columns, the hand-carved columns that you'll see on the upper freestanding arch portion right there, will be carved identically to the ones that are found on the backside of the house, original to the structure. You can see it in the elevation directly behind you on sheet A206. And I have images in the last part of this presentation also to show you. Down below we see a plan picking up the spiral staircase coming from below. We show the existing crawl space that has been cleaned up with a stronger retaining wall, as that retaining wall is going to be a shared wall with the pool once the pool is relocated. The space itself is going to be a recreation room for fitness equipment. I believe we'll have hardwood floor in there as well for dance studio, dance practicing, things along those lines. And then the bottom left is a bathroom, which will be considered the pool bathroom now that the unpermitted pool bathroom up above has been demolished. That will be the pool bathroom for all guests. And this drawing just tries to show the relationship of the existing house with the addition. It's somewhat of an oblique angle looking back at it. I don't think there's a place on the property that you can physically grab this entire view. Perhaps from an aerial or something like that, this would be perceived. Touching on your point about the view shed from Columbus and Cumberland, it was something that I had not identified until you had mentioned it out, and certainly when you go through that area walking, you can identify it. It's as if you're looking up somewhat of Italian hill town. You kind of see Spanish tile roofs, a couple asphalt roofs and whatnot, but you kind of get the stepping feeling of going up a hill. We don't perceive this structure being out of line with that. In other words, we see it being more or less in the massing of the other structures that are on the hill. With perhaps some vegetation and whatnot, certainly with a bougainvillea, we'll take down the whiteness of the massing right now. But perhaps some more infill between Cumberland and the actual property. We think over time we'll probably fill in some space so that view shed may not always be there. And this is a rendering. This more or less shows the idea and intent of the final product. It doesn't show any of the furniture necessarily on there, but it does show the permanent structures that we intend on building. The archway, the freestanding structure is more or less in the same scale as the adjacent building. The wood trellis doesn't necessarily fall in period, but with some carvings and some detailing, we think we can get it a little bit closer and certainly antiquing it a little bit. But we don't think it's too large of a structure against the historic look that we would ask for it to not be part of this project. This rendering also shows a cleaned up version of the master bathroom addition, and also picks up more of the vegetation that we held from the other drawings just to show the massing and what we're doing. And this is just a detail of the actual freestanding structure that we intend on building. It shows the columns that we're going to pick up from the rest of the main residence. We're indicating on the back side a outdoor fireplace, which would be a formed plaster. We were really just going to keep it into that rough, not smooth trowel, but it's a trowel stucco that leaves somewhat of an undulation and an imperfection to it, which is found all over the house and most houses that were built in this time. And the contractor and the owner are adamant about recreating that imperfection throughout the additions. We will try to utilize tile that was taken off of the existing pool house that was removed, and we will supplement the addition on the upper right to the master bathroom with that tile, as well as a tile band on top of this freestanding structure that you can see right there. The Spanish tile, the decorative tile, will either be elements that we've picked up before or will be elements that will match to some of the existing tile that we've found on the property. And this just shows the existing elements that we're going to pick up from, if not duplicate, if not redo or purchase. The fixtures down below, I don't know if they were absolutely integral to the house, but the design of them are, and they're consistent throughout, so we're going to try to pick up 2 more of those fixtures, almost exactly. If not, we'll try to have them replicated. The fixture on the upper right will be hanging from the freestanding structure. We show that on 2 ends of that. The clay tile roof has been there since 1929, as is the decorative band around the rotunda, which is in the middle right. And then the wrought iron and the tile risers are all elements that we'll continue to introduce into the project as we see fit. That's all I have for now. Thank you.
Are there any other speakers? Or any first questions for the architect?
Would you like a question?
I have no questions at this time.
I just have one question. The one that's I'm interested in. When they were talking about, when Milo was talking about the increasing the recess of the master bathroom addition by 3 or 4, how will it affect your design?
On the inside?
Yeah.
If I can... It should not impact the bathroom. I need to step away from the microphone just to point. This is a bathtub, this is a shower, this is the toilet room, so we're just dealing with makeup counters and vanity counters. So I have the ability to pull this back to the depth of this counter, so I can probably come back up to probably 18 inches.
Okay.
So in terms of impact,
Yeah.
I have a question as well. You mentioned that the clay tile on the roof was an original 1929 roof tile. And the one on the pool house would have been at a later date. Do they match, or is there going to be a differentiation?
I'll verify. They relatively appear to be in the same flavor and same wearing and value of color. If not, I guess our recourse is to introduce new clay tiles, but try to weather them or try to age them, antique them. I know this contractor is very, very good at fauxing things to try to restore them into that vein. But that's something that we'd have to address when we get to it. Is that something that we would bring back to the board as a...
If the commission asks you to, they might allow that to be reviewed at staff level. The other thing to consider is salvage tile.
Sure. Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Then we're good. We'd like to bring up the other request to speak. That's as the owner of the house, Mario Lopez. If he'd come up.
I'll put your name in if you wanted to speak. I don't know if you wanted to. If you wanted to supplement anything.
Hello, good afternoon. First of all, when I did meet Seth, I did say that I do want to die in that house, however much later.
Yes.
God willing.
Yes.
But it's interesting because I've lived in the Glendale, Burbank area now since the early 90s, I would say. Yeah, since about 91, 92. And I've moved 4 or 5 times within probably a mile from back and forth on the other side of Brand Park. And I used to actually live on Cumberland, which I really liked. And I came upon this house because I like to run, and I was running up and down the hills and finding different paths. And I was running, and I stopped and looked at the plaques because I liked when I come across the historic homes. That's always been my favorite subject is history. So I was looking and I saw that, oh, cool, Peter Dam invented the armored car. Something really cool as opposed to something not so cool. And there was this nice older lady who recognized me and she started talking to me. And she said, you know, this house is for sale. I said, really? And I wasn't necessarily looking, but I had my sister and her family moving and really close to my family and recently started a family of my own with that beautiful young lady sitting over there. And I was like, wow, that might be, you know, I want to stay in this area and maybe my sister kind of slides into my house now, which was in Burbank. If I found something like this, you know, I didn't know if I could afford it at the time or whatever. So fast forward, we hit it off and I kept talking to her and one thing led to another and I ended up purchasing the house. However, when I went into the home and I saw, and I did the research and I saw it was an old Spanish home and I love that. It was obviously part of my culture and something that I wanted to sort of restore back to its natural glory and character, if you will, because the lady's son, whose property it actually was, had this really sort of cheesy 80s Miami vibe going on that was not relative to the house. But I saw the potential. And I saw what I could do with it over time. And I loved the privacy. And I loved the neighborhood. And I loved what the community was about. And I loved that it was a home that I could see myself and my family being on for the rest of my life, quite frankly. And I also love the fact that it was basically on an acre, much of it on flat land. Yes, it does slope towards the new thing that we're proposing right now. But ideally, I saw room for improvement, and I made the mistake of assuming if you had a deck and it fell down, I thought once it was already there, based on the other guy, you could just build another one. Well, you know, young guy, I'm learning as I go. But I want to, you know, do right by the city, do right by the property, and most importantly, do right by the house, because that's what I want to do is it's take it back to the way Mr. Dam intended it to be and really be meticulous about having that Spanish influence. And those are my intentions, and that's what I want to do, and I want to do it with your support and with my neighbors and community support. And I have plans on being there not only for a long time, being involved in the city for a long time, and political aspirations later on at that. So this is all a very new and eye-opening process for me, but something that I welcome and willing to do whatever it is that we need to do. But I think with Seth clearly being a talented, articulate, intelligent designer, and with the contractor that I am now working with, who's both very much on the ball and has a wealth of experience, you know, I think we're on the right track. And I look forward to your thoughts. I look forward to, you know, moving forward and hopefully developing into the beautiful place that I really see it being. And I got a letter recently, I think I may have told some of you, from I believe it was the Historic Boards, about opening my home to tours for people that are interested in seeing historic properties. And I would love to do that currently in the state, obviously not now, but later on when it's ready to go, would love to be able to show it off and talk about it and share it with the neighborhood and the people who appreciate historic homes like I do. So all the more reason why I really want it to be in all its glory. So anyway, that's all I got.
Thank you very much. Any questions? None?
But I'm just going to say, I think you mean the Glendale Historical Society, and I'm only saying that because if they hear it, they'll be very pleased.
I have one letter from a Michael Cooney. Do I need to read it, or can we just enter it into the record?
You just
Summarize it?
indicate that it's supportive of the project.
It's supportive of the project, and one of the concerns was viewing it, and he says that my wife, Joyce, and I live at 360 Brockmont Drive, and our house faces directly into the work being done. And he goes on and on and on, and saying about how good the construction is so far. And the existing mature trees and plants on the property along the north side of Brockmont Drive hide most of the construction. Even though our house faces directly into the new construction area, little of it can be seen from our house. It is largely hidden. So.
We were supposed to open the public hearing for that, so you can do that, and then I don't know if we have other speaker cards.
No, we have no more speaker cards. Then we'll close the public hearing. Shall open up to discussion. Shall we begin with you?
Okay. Well, I'll start, Mr. Lopez, by saying, in talking to you and in listening to you today, I think it's very obvious that you definitely have a lot of appreciation for your historic home, and I appreciate your intentions and the care you're taking in making the modifications that you're making. I do find that the proposal does fit within the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation. Number 9 that says the new work shall be differentiated from the old and shall be compatible with the massing, size, scale, and architectural features to protect the historic integrity of the property and its environment. I think the plans actually are very beautiful. I think they're very sensitive to the property. I do appreciate that there is very minimal. I did go to the corner of Columbus and Cumberland and did step out of my car to take a look, and I do think the impact is very nominal, and it's with the terracing and the stepping up, I think it's very nice, actually. I also appreciate that your the quality of the materials that you intend to use and some of the design elements, like recreating some of the lamps that already exist on the property, those beautiful carved pilasters, which are also found, I think, on your living room, the triple arch of the living room window. I think those are really nice elements to incorporate and to keep. Overall, I think it's a very nice design. I would agree with staff's recommendation, and I know that Mr. Briskman addressed the arcade across the entertainment room. But if you could, I would like to see the windows become a little narrower and more in keeping with, I think, traditional proportions for a Spanish-style home of that period. But I do appreciate that you've raised the landing in front of the entertainment room to make up for the height differential. And then in terms of the bathroom, I think I would be fine leaving the setback to the staff's discretion. Yes, thank you very much. In terms of how far back to move that, just to delineate the new construction from the original construction. So with that, I think those are my only comments at the moment. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Lopez. Well, I want to start off by saying that Lorelei is just a fabulous piece of property and is a true jewel in Glendale. It's been one of the oldest homes, I believe, on the historic registry. Right? One of the older
earliest
homes.
designations.
And it is just north of the proposed Brockmont district. And on Saturday, I walked through and I visited the property. And having had walked through the property many years ago, I did recognize that you have put in a lot of effort in cleaning up the vegetation and the trees and plants, and it looks very manicured and beautiful right now. So if that's the attention and the time and effort that you put into the house, I think that's wonderful. The new design of the recreation room and the deck, I think it's very mindful of the home and does not take away any historic material or features. And it incorporates a new addition. In the new addition, the arches, the carved columns, and some of the lamps, and taking from the old historic elements of the house. So that is very much appreciated that it is incorporated in the new design. Secretary of the Interior Standards for Rehabilitation requires that the new work be differentiated from the old and shall be compatible with the massing size, scale, and architectural features to protect the historic integrity and property of the property and its environment. And I feel the openness of the design and the location does respect the massive scale. My concerns when I came to the property were that the recreation room might look overbearing for the homes below. And once I stood there at the edge of the recreation room and then later on looked at it from the street level, it really was not at all. It did not take away from the integrity of the home. And also from the edge of the recreation room, there are several tiers of terraced garden. So there's quite a bit of space between the recreation room and the property below, and it is also separated by and shielded by tall hedges. My second concern was how is the addition going to look from the street below, and that again I felt that it was fine. And my other concern was how would it fit into the context of the property. And again, I feel that according to the Secretary of Interior's Standard of Rehabilitation, which states that the character of the property shall be retained and preserved, I believe that it does. It does in terms of scale and in terms of historic features that are included in the design. I would have to agree with the conditions of staff to have the windows in the recreation room slightly narrower so that it would be in keeping with the arches around the house as well. And moving the new bathroom wall a couple of inches, and that would be up to your discretion. And also addressing zoning issues, which might come up. And I also do appreciate refurbishing historic homes and bringing them up to code and current zone, because that really does preserve the life of the property. So thank you for putting your time, effort, and into this home. I do appreciate it.
I would also like to echo what my commissioners have also said. It was an interesting house to go to, and I thank Mr. Lopez for allowing us to go inside for a few seconds. You can see his attention to detail when you just walk into the foyer of the house. It's all been restored back to what it was originally, and that's something that I like to see when you're looking at somebody's house, that they not only do they restore the inside or the outside, but they have the whole idea of the inside and the outside work so well together. I like everything that they've done so far on it. It looks very well. The footprint is very good. I am a little concerned about the few inches that Milka was talking about. If it is, does it help with the actual differentiating between the old and the new? Is that the main reason for doing the?
Yes, it does, but I'd like to actually defer to Jay Platt, since he's actually going to be reviewing also more of the design aspects, whereas I'm going to be doing more of the zoning side of it.
Okay.
Thank you.
It's kind of a classic technique in preservation architecture to kind of use a step back like that to kind of differentiate. And the architect did do one. We just thought it was so negligible it didn't read as well. And when it was clear that the interior space use wasn't going to change at all, I think everyone's good with doing something larger. Probably not 18 inches, probably more 8 to 10 inches, something like that.
And he's already said that they can work with that. So I think that everything so far that has been mentioned, I agree with. If you look down the terrace gardens, if you look at the bottom, you can see the restoration that Mr. Lopez has done just with the stonework and the grass. And you can imagine what it had looked like prior to that, and you realize that this gentleman cares very much for this house, and like you said, he'll probably live there for a long time, and hopefully he does. And I agree with that. And if the staff thinks these things need to be done, I will go along with what the staff says. I do believe that when you look at the windows in the rec room, they tend to be a little squat, and when you look at the rest of the house, it would be nice if they can make them more rectangular than square. So, other than that, I agree with what staff has said so far. So, should we have
motion? Yeah.
Yeah. So, can we have a motion, please?
Your microphone might be off.
Phone is off. So do I need to re-say that?
Yeah.
Okay. So I move to approve the proposed project with conditions 1 through 3 as proposed by staff. And I think that covers, number 2, covers the recess of the master bath addition. And as was brought up, I think, by Commissioner Tufankian, can we ask staff to review the tile materials?
Yes.
To ensure that they are in keeping with the existing tiles of the home. That would be the roof tiles.
The roof tiles. And I heard, and the architect could correct, there were also some salvage decorative tiles. Are you planning to reincorporate those, or just
take inventory to understand?
Okay. Well, we'll look at both roof tiles and then any decorative tiles to make sure it meets the standards.
That would be great.
Mm-hmm. So just to read that back, so we all know, there are now 4 conditions. 1, to change the proportions of the windows of the rec room to make them more rectangular,
Right.
a little bit narrower. 1, to have an increased setback or step back at the facade of the master bathroom. The 3rd condition is written in the staff report, basically reflects the uncertainty right now about how some of the zoning issues might affect the design. It doesn't seem likely that we'll need to come back to the commission, but we definitely will if there's any kind of significant change. With the commission's permission, we would move forward with modest changes that would allow this to meet zoning. And then a 4th condition will be a staff review of any roof tiles or other decorative tiles that are salvaged from the site, from other places that are going to be in the new structures. So.
I think that's it.
We'll hear a second.
I second.
A roll call.
Commissioner Tofankian,
Yes.
Commissioner Vartanian,
Yes.
and Chairperson Morgan.
Yes.
Thank you.
We thank you very much.
And before we move off this, Jay, can you give us a little history lesson? And do we know the origins of the word Lorelei as a name for the house?
Well, he was German, and I think Lorelei comes from a name from German mythology, if I'm right. And you guys have probably researched more than I have.
Yeah, just curious.
Yeah.
I'm interested myself.
Yeah. Come on up. Tell the world.
Tell us the story.
Like history. So I looked him up. Lorelei was a popular song, and the song was about the sailors who used to sail through this particular canal, but there was a beautiful statue in the middle of the canal, and when the winds hit it, it sounded like it was a female, like she was singing, and it's kind of a tragic song. The sailors would get mesmerized by it and go towards the statue itself, and they would meet their peril. So that's where they'd meet their doom. But in the song, there's a phrase called "the winds of Lorelei." So when he went and because of he positioned the house, when he opened up all the windows, the wind and the air going through the house reminded of the song Lorelei and the wind.
Except for the doom part.
Except for the doom and the peril and the crashing of the ships.
So we hope you don't mean your doom by the winds of Lorelei.
I hope not, but that's the history. That's what he did.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I did actually hear that story just a couple of nights ago, but couldn't remember it at all, so thank you.
Okay, continue with our agenda.
Yeah, as soon as I find it.
To make it easy, we don't have any planning division updates.
Oh, well, number 8, Planning Division updates, informational briefings. Since we don't have any, we will continue to number 9, adjournment.
Second.